Hi there, Dave.
Hey, Stephen. Hopefully,
Your sound is a bit low, I think.
I'm working on it. Working on it. Testing. One, two, three. Testing. One, two, three.
Yeah, not too sure what the normal level of sound is now. I'll try YouTube, see what that sounds like.
Testing. One, two, three.
Yeah, I think you sound okay.
Okay, so that's there. Part. Uh Phil, not Phil Chan. Phil from the Philosophers and Gamblers San Jose meeting removed me from his group. I have no idea why.
Oh,
So there's a lot of people who signed up for this, but I can't give them the link
oh,
because
rightio.
Phil removed me from his group and I don't know why. And I'm not going
Yeah,
to ask.
yeah, yeah. I notice. Uh, I think I accidentally joined via the Philadelphia site, and there was a number of people on there. Let's try it again.
You want to see something funny? Here's something funny. You want to see something funny? Here's something funny.
Uh, you're
Look at
feeling
this.
very funny at the moment.
This is Mark. Hey, he sent this last night. Hey, is it okay if I show up about 6:20? I won't be off work until about then. I did not respond. And just about an hour ago, he wrote, Hi, David. I don't see a link to join the discussion, so I won't be coming. Thanks for hosting.
Uh, okay.
Yeah, right. What do you, you tell me. You tell me. You tell me.
Yeah, it looks like you're by the Philadelphia. Your link's still there, and yeah, it looks like
Well,
yeah,
you
you've
know,
got.
I don't post it until maybe 10 minutes before. My question is always, why do you need the link before the meeting starts?
I don't know the
No
flying
point.
saucers that are going around Earth. I get on my radio and talk to the flying saucer people, and they say you're one of the great mysteries in the universe. And this thing you've got about posting the link a few minutes before the meeting's got them really puzzled.
All you're doing is you're setting yourself up for frustration. If you click on the link an hour before and then it doesn't do anything because the meeting hasn't started yet. So you just go,
Well,
why
that's what
why
it
isn't the meeting
says.
on?
It tells you, whether the host has joined or not.
I'll post it when the meeting started. There's no point in posting it earlier than that.
Right.
Anyway, but the point is, why does he feel the need to tell me? I don't care. I don't care. Why do I
Well,
care?
he has that disposition, so he's saying he would like to come, but he won't be able to join the meeting until a bit later.
What do I care? I don't care if you come. I don't care if you don't come. What am
Well,
I supposed to do?
maybe there is something there.
What am I supposed to do with that information? Why does he feel the need to communicate with me at all? I does me no good. This is why I live my life the way I live it. Keeping people at a distance. This is why. This is why.
Okay. So copy in it twice. Once will do.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi, Ismail.
Hi. Yes. Nice to meet you. My name is Ismail. I'm joining from Montreal. I'm a teacher.
Okay, trying to figure out your surname. Is it Turkish or something like that?
Yes, I'm Turkish. I'm in Montreal for the summer to learn some French. That's I'm enjoying the weather in Montreal right now. Have you been to Montreal?
Oh, I'm in Australia. I haven't been outside Australia actually. So maybe David. No, probably David. No.
Hmm. It's my first time in this group. So you guys are talking about different philosophical topics, I guess.
this is our
Well, we
comic book.
can.
This is our comic book reading group. We choose a comic book, graphic novel. We read it, and we come here every Friday night at this time to talk comic.
Hmm.
And the comic graphic novel that we have chosen is Capital and Ideology
Hmm.
for this week.
Yeah, Ismail, you're not familiar with the comic at all, are you?
No,
That's
like
okay.
comic books.
Yeah. Well, the comic book. Well, we'll put it up.
Eventually, Stephen will share. Eventually, when he feels.
Uh,
Hmm.
it's a comic book story about a French family and their traditions going back to the past, and how their family acquired wealth in the French Revolution and the generations that followed after. And of course, it's rather leftist in its outlook. Has that some of the issues. Her great ancestors were owned slaves at the time of the French Revolution, so she found the sort of papers which detailed slave ownership, and this lady felt very broken up by this, and then she was the last part of the comic is talking about sort of a socialist sort of politics, a socialist outlook. So if you like history, uh, if you like politics, you've got two angles.
Hmm.
There you go. Oh, Ismail, so you're born in Turkey, were you?
Yes. Hmm.
Alrighty, and migrated to Canada.
What?
Migrated to Canada, I assume.
I I moved here 8 years ago, but I'm going back to Turkey this October. Um, yeah, I won't stay any longer. It's I think I missed the home. That's what I can say more.
Well, I'd probably, yeah, well, well, what is it? Anatolia, uh, the Great Isthmus, there's a lot of history there.
Mhm.
I have a friend and, he goes to Europe and he tours Europe and he
Mhm.
loves touring Europe, goes back and back and back and keeps on going back. But he went to America once and he decided touring America once is enough. But Europe, yeah, he said it's just a really great place to tour. And Anatolia, it's going to be much the same story there. You from Istanbul or another part?
Mhm. Yeah,
Istanbul.
I live in Asian side of Istanbul. Uh, yeah, its life is fine, but you need to make dollars. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's the unfortunate side of Turkey is, yeah, money's very limited. It's a bit of a
Mhm.
struggle.
You need to have a good salary, otherwise it's expensive. It's getting too expensive for locals. Mm.
Yeah, well, I imagine it's a great place to live if you've got a bit of money. Get a
Mhm.
nice,
Yeah.
find yourself a nice apartment somewhere and
Yeah, luckily I have the apartment, so I don't have to pay for rent. That's why I'm returning. Yeah, if I have to pay for rent, yeah, then I wouldn't go to Istanbul. I would go to Antalya. In Antalya, you can live without having that much problem actually. But Istanbul, no. Istanbul is really terrible right now for someone who doesn't have a house.
All right, yeah. So Istanbul very expensive, but
Oh, yeah, very expensive. It's like,
other parts of Antalya.
yeah, the rest other than Istanbul, it's fine. You can have a decent life.
Yeah, well, a lot of people love the Mediterranean. You know, you have friends, and you go to the Mediterranean regions. There's just so much history, even other parts of Europe. Yeah, so rich. You know, people talk about it. You know, there's so much of the Western tradition. It's feeling in the Western tradition came from those regions.
Like ancient Greece, you mean?
Yeah, the ancient, ancient culture there. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
ancient Greece is actually
Phoenicia, in a sense, began a sort of a modern culture. They were the ones that spread all the trade routes throughout the Mediterranean. The alphabet, you might say the Phoenicians probably originated a new type of thinking, which people think is purely Greek, but really the Greeks copied the Phoenicians. Most people are not aware of that. The Phoenicians certainly had at least one colony in Greece, and this is very, very early, a few centuries before the classical times, and they had a lot of influence. But that was sort of Anatolia, Greece, the Levant was sort of like the center of civilization in those early days.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Hunter hasn't got anything to say. Ronald has something to say. No? Anybody in the waiting room? We haven't left anybody out, have we, Dave?
Well, we know Kia, but sometimes people don't want to be on the recording, which is fine. You don't have to be.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, well.
That's all right.
Well, this is the okay. Just switch over. No.
A return to the comics we used to do. We used to do a lot of these kinds. We don't so much anymore. But welcome return. Here we go.
Okay, capital and ideology. So this is talking about this family which dates back to the time of the French Revolution. And they've done it in comic form, which makes it very accessible. This is, where you do history in comic form. I don't know, Ismail, have you ever come across any, in Turkey, did you ever see any comics which told you the history of Turkey or something like that? Or maybe you never saw anything?
I myself studied history, but I never seen like comic books that is serious like this. Most of the comic books are like Spider-Man or like
Okay, yeah, fiction.
Fiction, yeah.
So here we are, we have the family tree. Coming from the time of the French Revolution, ends up strongly expressing the ideas of this girl, Leah. Anyway, we're going back. It starts off, it censors itself on what oh, I got somebody at the door. Excuse me. Hello? Oh, yeah. I'm sort of busy at the moment.
Oh, no worries.
There's the watchtower.
Yeah, Johannes witnesses.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
No, good, thank you.
Yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses every few months.
Right.
Okay, back to the comic. Yeah, it starts off and it centres where the family was around about 1900 or 1901 in this case. That would have been an era to live, you know, when you had if you had wealth, you had servants to take care of everything. It's talking about some of the politics of the time, you know, the rivalry between Great Britain, France, and the politics of the time. And of course, this person who'd done the comic is very much a believer in progressive conditions for the working class, and you know, progressive taxation became an issue at the time. And okay, here we are. You know, they belong to the top decile, which is among the richest 10% in France. Yeah, well, they divided the population into 10 ascending orders of wealth. In the highly unequal Europe of 1901, the richest 10% own 80 to 90% of the wealth. As for the poorest 50%, the bracket to just about everybody else in the market belongs. How many more times? So, you know, the politics was coming up. How many more times are they going to keep bringing up this new tax? So around about 1901, automobiles are still quite a rarity. You know, the horse transport's still a thing. Okay, until now, the tax system inherited from the French Revolution has held firm. Liberty, equality, proportionality. You know, proportional taxation. And so, yeah, I don't know if I can sort of go into all the detail of the politics. Invest in the Suez Canal. Okay, you know, this was a wealthy class in many European countries at the time around 1901, and they're always looking for new investments to get rentier sort of earnings. Invest in the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, or both. It's riskier, but the risk pays off. Yeah, we find out later the French were strong savers and they invested heavily in Russian bonds at the time. Okay, so, you know, this is centering on one person who starts to meet a future marriage prospect. If I remember correctly, I think she's an American of French descent. And so for some reason, she's in Paris. And now it's jumping back to when things really began with the French Revolution. Pierre is Jules' great-great-grandfather. He's a member of the nobility. His lands in Bordeaux come with a monopoly on the ovens and mills known as a banality. Okay, probably associated with the word banal. So if you're noble, up to the French Revolution, you had monopolies on business. The ancient regime, which was overthrown, is a name given to the French pre-revolutionary society it was divided into 3 estates: the clergy, the nobility, and everybody else, known as the third estate. In 1780, which 2 estates, while representing less than 2% of the French population, controlled the majority of resources and goods. Who wants to be a rentier? I do. The nobility and the clergy. The third estate, all the others. The revolution challenged this balance for Jules' ancestors as much as everybody else. Bordeaux, August 1789, the abolition of privileges has been voted in. Get the right. Pierre has an appointment with his brother. Since the news of the events in Paris in July arrived in town. Thank you, citizen. They get on my nerves with their citizen. The 2 brothers are anxious, like all those with privileges now. In fact, the revolution did not have the same fate in store for both of them. Okay, what was once the Royal Drums bar is now just the drums. Still get a drink. After the abolition of the privileges of the clergy and the nobility, revolutionary legislators are left with the task of drawing up a list of these privileges and drawing a line between those that will be strictly abolished, those that will be considered legitimate and maintained, and those that can be compensated for. For landowners, the revolution has raised endless questions. What does abolishing privilege actually mean? How can the stability of society be guaranteed without the 3 estates? Well, this is the big question of equality, isn't it? Equality. What's equality done to us? Equality presents a problem because people aren't really equal in ability. You know, some people are highly motivated in to fulfill roles in society, and others just like to follow. And when you give them equality, which is what's happened to our present society, a lot of people are not really sure of what's going on. Ancient societies, which had a strong hierarchy, had a strong ability to deal with things as they stood. We're now living in a society where let's say the ancient societies had different classes, and each class had its responsibilities and its liberties. So a higher order of liberties went hand in hand with responsibilities. Those down the bottom had little liberty, but they didn't have the responsibilities to worry about either. For example, in the ancient Anglo-Saxon society, they had a class called thanes, which were the sort of highest order of common men. But the thane, although he had superior rights under the law, he also had the responsibility of maintaining the roads, making sure each village had a public hall and had a church or a chapel, and altogether just keeping tabs on the events of a village. Okay. Well, this is something, I sort of went through once, and, it'd probably be a study, and being a comic book, it'd be great to study, if I was still a kid loving comic books. I'll probably be going over this again and again. Watch out, the centralised state becomes a protector of property rights. And the question is the amount of tax. Okay, as a member of the petty nobility, when land was transferred, he actually got the transfer tax. So I assume the noble was paying taxes to the state, but he was also personally gaining certain types of taxes. As all the taxes and duties invented from the Revolution to the early 20th century will be strictly proportional, so what? It's already too much. So this is comparing a proportional tax where everybody, let's say, pays the same tax on wages. Let's say it's 20%, and of course it's 20% for the various richest as well. But progressive tax has the idea of taxing the rich a greater percentage. Okay, we're back to about 1900 and our particular personality of the family at that time. He's white, male, wealthy and European. In 1901, even more so today, he's a very archetype of the king of the world. Well, yes, the white male Europeans came to gradually dominate world politics in the 500-year period from about 1500 to the year 2000, and still have a very strong influence. Well, that whole period was dominated by what were virtually commercial empires. You go back to the 15th or the 16th and 17th centuries, and Spain was a great commercial power dominating world's trade. In the 30 Years' War, Spain lost influence. France very cleverly cooperated with the Protestants to overturn Spanish power or Habsburg power, and France became one of the great powers for a couple of centuries. And then France ultimately lost the Napoleonic War, which led to Britain becoming the great commercial empire of the 19th century, and Britain became bankrupt during the World Wars, leaving America as a present power, which has again been challenged by others. So we have this continuing turmoil between various world powers over who controls world trade. Okay. The inequality of property knows no bounds. Okay. So it's again sort of picking on, various members of the family in a roundabout fashion. Back to 1788, the French islands. Mauritius and the Antilles, the highest concentration of slaves in the Euro-American world. Saint Domingue, which yes, there was a French part which became, what's the name now? Haiti. And the Spanish part is still called Dominica. Well, during the revolution, the French Revolution, the slaves revolted. But when Napoleon came to power, he tried to regain or re-establish power over the slave colonies. And, well, we had the case of Haiti. Okay, after the French Revolution, Charles X was threatening to attack the now freed slave colony and demanded reparations for the slave owners. And this is an interesting thing that looks like Haiti was paying money until payments began in 1832 and were continuing to relatively recent times. In 1833, the United Kingdom sort of abolished slavery completely. Again, the slave owners were compensated. It's going on about the family in the 19th century, and there was still that background of slave ownership, which created their wealth. The Pandorian argument, in reference to the well-known myth of the box of the same name. Now, it seems the box contains certificates of slave ownership, which entitles them to compensation. And this box was kept semi-secret. Yeah, so there's a lot of events in the 19th century and how the well-to-do maintain their money. That's brought up the game of Risk. It's impossible not to agree that, this is back in the 19th century, that Europe dominates the world in the game of Risk. I don't know if anybody's played the game of Risk. Okay. If anybody sees something they would like to dwell on, let me know. 1865, they were having a manor house built because their wealth enabled them to do this, but they became less wealthy in the 20th century, which led to the manor house being difficult to afford. But it was a central thing in the family. The families establishing themselves in various places. Back to 1901. In dealing with an extended family, which is kept together by the manor house. But in the 20th century, after World War I, things started to change a bit, and the wealthy classes were not maintaining their position that well. Well, there we are. Roosevelt, the man behind the New Deal, beloved of all sort of socialist, semi-socialist outlooks. Back in the days of the idle rich and the not so idle rich. Okay. 1939, Germany invades Poland. The Second World War begins. General mobilization order. And unlike World War I, France suffers very badly. the French commands just couldn't operate with the speed that the German command could. It took, I think I came across somewhere that the German commands could appraise a situation and give a set of orders in a few hours to its fighting units, whereas the French took 1 to 2 days. And there you have it. Otherwise, the French probably could have blocked the Germans. But it was just that their communications were so slow. After the war, inflation sets in. And as it points out, this is the big way of getting out of public debt, is inflating the currency, which must be looking very tempting in America right now, and generally in the West. The Western countries, the Anglo-Saxon countries, European countries have ran up big debts, and they must be very tempted by the idea of inflating their currency, which is something that happened very much during COVID, particularly in the first part of 2020, and then gold went through the roof and they had to slow down their printing presses enormously. Past few years, the devaluation has been very low. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. That if they continue with this very low devaluation per year that's happening at the moment, say the American dollar, then we should be heading towards a deflationary event. So will they try to counter that by printing money? Now, fascinatingly, the whole big question of money, gold and silver were shooting through the roof last year. And then it fell strongly. And I link one big event to this. This is American bombs going to the Gulf. American bombs support the dollar. So last year, the world was betting against the dollar. Saudi Arabia was talking about leaving the dollar standards. And Trump went there and made some sort of a deal. And at the moment, they've put sticks under the American dollar to keep it going for a while. And hence, gold and silver fell in price. The bet against the dollar lost some of its strength for the moment. It'll be interesting to see where things go in the future. But yeah, the post-war period was a very inflationary period. Okay, this is the one I love. They don't know it, but the era that's beginning, and that will be known as the 30 years of glory. So this was the post-war economy, which they say sort of ran for a generation. Okay, hello, Mark. Okay, everybody got that? The 30 Years of Glory, the great legend. I haven't seen this illustrated. Hi, Mark. How's it going? The 30 Years of Glory, that period's from, hi, Mark. Yeah. Yeah, we're investigating this comic, which is a history comic. It's talking about a French family and 200 over 200 years of their family and the economic events and the change in history. But I was just thinking, Mark, what do you think that post-war period from about 1945 to 1975, where everyone was doing very well in the Western world, and they're calling it the 30 Years of Glory? What created that? The world grew up in and are already nostalgic for what was characterized, right? Okay. Okay, so this is yeah, what 98% of these revenues were devoted to structural state requirements, leaving almost nothing for education and wealth. And again, it's the great 30 years of glory. Again, putting in the question of progressive taxation has been the great magical force which created the 30 years of glory, which I say no. Reversal of this discourse still dominates today. Emmanuel Macron in 2017. I don't want to penalise success. The 30 years of glory are proof that taxing the richest pays off socially and economically. Are there any true believers here? Now, I used to be sort of socialist in my outlook until about my 40s, and I did a lot of study, and what apparently was the huge growth of the post-war period was genuine economic growth. There was vast expansions in manufacturing, but more than that, oil. It was the growth in the world's oil production was rather huge. Like in 1945, world oil production was about 5 million barrels a day. And then by about 1980, had gotten up to 65 million barrels a day of conventional oil. Actually, conventional oil hasn't increased since the late 70s. What has increased greatly is unconventional oil. So in practical terms, the world's oil supply is now about 100 million barrels a day. But of course, it's not the lightning growth that occurred after World War II. From 1945 to 1950, oil production doubled. Then from 1950 to 1960, oil production doubled again. And then from 1960 to 1970, it doubled again. But in the 70s, it only increased by about 50%. And that slowdown in oil growth had quite an effect. So you had the economic troubles of the 1970s, but people seem to think it was a magic of Keynesianism, which might have contributed, but there were actual material factors for the vast growth after World War II. And of course, governments could easily overspend in high economic growth because next year's economic growth always forgave the sins of previous spending. And this was what broke down in the 1970s and why they adopted gave up on Keynesian economics and replaced it with Milton Friedman's economics to deal with the slowdown in growth. Okay, they're giving birth to another one of the family. This is a comic about, this French family in over 200 years of their history, from their French Revolution to the present day. And who got born here? Oh, yeah, one baby, Christine. Jean. I said, if you see anything interesting, do not open Pandora's box. It's still there in the family heirlooms, which contains papers of slave ownership. India significantly reduced inequality between 1950 and 2000. Okay, now it's talking about having workers on the board of directors, which seems to have been a European thing. So this was, strong in countries like Germany, France, not quite as much. In German companies, the workers got seats on the board of directors. It was not until 2013 that the law obliged large French companies to allocate seats on the board. Hi, Mark. Yeah. Yeah. What?
Are we going to have any discussion?
Yes.
Like-
So we'll get to a discussion. Yes. Yes. It's rather a long one to get through.
Okay.
Where are we now? Well, yeah, I'll try and finish up after the hour. It's going for, this is quite an extensive comic, and it's covering a lot of periods of history and events in this French family. And again, I see this great image. Europe has seen unprecedented economic and social growth in the 30 years of glory, again, referring to that post-World War II period, which, I mean, considering good parts of Europe were knocked down, you're certainly going to get growth for starters, but very much there was a vast expansion in the oil supply, which enabled expansion in new types of manufacturing. Okay. The social classes were pitted against each other. The left was a camp of workers and less well educated. On the right, those who owned property and had high incomes. I mentioned Ronald Reagan, our great hero. I mentioned Nixon. I can still remember Nixon winning in 1968. Margaret Thatcher. So this is also, of course, encountering the current battle between the left and the right. The left wanting a vast progressive taxation system, a lot of government spending, which is now an item in America. And it's talking about the youngest Lee, who were, her parents were teachers, so rather leftist. She goes through university, goes to America, which Yale, she goes to Yale, meets a boyfriend there of some type. Okay. When the tax rates applied to these very high incomes were higher, very high salaries were contained. What's the point of earning more if almost everything goes to the tax man? Okay. There were very high tax rates post-war, although it's not quite as simple as that. There were a lot of ways of getting out of the tax by investments. You could reduce your tax take by investing money in various things. The famous richest 1% have become considerably richer, while the poorest 50% have virtually stagnated since the 1960s. But ma'am, can we compare these inequalities with those of the Belle Epoque in Europe? So she's probably referring back to about 1900. In economics, we call taxes and transfers operation carried out after payment of primary income. Allowances, benefits, that's a redistribution policy. Redistribution, therefore, reduces inequality in comparable proportion in both countries, yet the United States is more unequal than France. Okay, yeah, the American minimum wage, just trying to recollect what it was back in 1970, the American minimum wage, if I remember correctly, it was about $58 a week. So the American minimum wage back in 1970 was about $1.50 an hour. But in real terms, it's no longer what it was before, because the American minimum wage, a week's wage, brought over an ounce of gold in 1970. Certain costs have remained rather similar, although manufactured goods have fallen dramatically in price over the last 50 years. Like I remember a TV set, even a black and white TV set in 1970 would probably cost you a few weeks' wages. Even a small radio was extremely expensive in today's terms. You know, a pocket transistor radio would probably be about $200 in today's terms. But all these goods have become rather cheaper. I rather like binoculars, and I remember even 30 years ago, a pair of binoculars I might like would cost 4 weeks minimum wage, whereas the same pair of binoculars now are only a week's minimum wage. Talking about the election, she's happy a leftist government of Francis Fillon has come in France. And from 1990 onwards, we see a different system known as the multiple elites, the centre-right nationalists, social democrats, and the radical left. The most qualified are called the Brahmin left, and for the wealthiest, the merchant right. The Brahmin left in France is those who've been in academia, you know, trained for something. Academic success, a taste for intellectual work, a diploma, while the merchant right relies on professional motivation, business sense, and well-handled negotiations. Well, certainly Donald Trump in America is the great emblem of well-handled negotiations. Well, he does try. How did Weffling parties become parties of the graduates? This is a trend that begins to emerge in the 1950s and 1960s. I think it probably has a lot to do with the expansion in white-collar jobs. They were once very uncommon. It was very difficult to get a white-collar job a long time ago. But then the government spending in the 1960s and 70s expanded that role greatly. The proportion of government spending in the GDP has expanded greatly. The trouble with this, and there's a downside to this, is that the capitalist economy knows that the government is an easy person to hit because the people running the government don't really care as much as people that own their own business about what the results are going to be. Somebody comes along with a program, they are easy fish. This is something that even was observed in the American Civil War, that you could sell the government anything. Globalization has not benefited everybody equally. So it's pointing out progressive taxation. Well, I'll try and get through this quickly. What's the time now? She goes back to Europe, doesn't want to get a job in Germany. Her boyfriend goes to Germany to work, and they split up. She wants to stay in these Mediterranean shores where the weather is better. rather than go to cold, miserable Germany. I think that's a building in the EU central building, which some people claim was modelled on the Tower of Babel. Okay, talking about the troubles with the bond market in Europe, whereas bond rates went up for places like Greece. They remained low for a place like Germany, so you could borrow money in Germany at say 2% and lend it to Greece at 6%. And this person believes this is a great injustice. What they don't understand is risk. This is a problem that the interest rate reflects risk as well. And in the case of Greece, there could have been a great deal of risk. Okay, with the 2008 GFC, the European Central Bank injected a lot of money in the crisis, saying about 2 billion, right, 2 trillion, okay. 2 trillion in assets. Now, a lot of people say that they print money, but what's actually happened is when a market falls, the private or the commercial banks become reluctant to lend money. I could actually see it in the figures. And the money piles up in the private banks because they don't want to lend it, because they don't think there's very good prospects on the market. And then the central bank will borrow the money from them. The central bank will give them a very sort of minimal interest rate on the money, and the central bank will then buy paper. So in other words, when people make this mistake of thinking automatically when they see this vast expansion in the central bank balance sheet that it represents a whole new printing of money, but it doesn't. It's simply a question the commercial banks have fallen back from the risk. And the money has ended up piling in the central bank. And the central bank takes a risk and buys the paper of various companies, like I think in the GFC, they even bought the bonds, Ford bonds, which nobody else wanted to buy in the environment. So, yes, the asset side was expanded greatly. Well, there's the famous image from the Great Depression of the woman and her family, or Okies or something like that were on the road. Here we are again. The 30 years of glory. We're all hankering for those great days that I was born in, and everybody else living after that thinks that's the new norm, and we've been shortchanged. We was robbed. Male and female pay gap, which, I don't know. These differences are so unfair. They're based on completely outdated stereotypes. What with that and the sexist ads everywhere, really. That's an interesting thing about public decorum, but do feminists own womanhood? Is every woman, without knowing it, being inducted to the grand order of feminists and they must obey the hierarchy? Well, I don't know. What do you do with women that decide they want to take all their clothes off, who don't fit in with the feminist order, who play the old game? The elephant curve. There's something overlooked. Now, they talk about the disappointing income for the middle class in Western countries, and they overlook that incomes in the former third world that have expanded greatly. I think I have asked, the modern generation in the West, if you could push a button which would send the former third world back to being the third world, but increased your lot, would you do it? And this is something they overlook. I did a lot of study on this back in the zeros of 2000. Everyone always sees that they've been shortchanged and they don't realise their benefits. But you're suffering from being on the side of the oppressors. Don't bring it. You can't share with me. So Lee is the descendant of the oppressors. It's actually an interesting thing, this whole idea of collective guilt or guilt through inheritance. It's the interesting thing that the church, when it started to convert Europe, sort of stamped down on the whole idea of guilt from past times. They were trying to prevent the hereditary wars that were going on between the nobility. And the church would say that the conflicts from the past, which don't have any real motive in the modern times other than that they're a past tradition, should be squashed, so to speak. All right, so let's see. In some parts of the world, the illegal share of total financial assets has reached staggering proportions. 4% in the USA, 57% in the oil states is quite fascinating. 50% in Russia, Africa 30%. Europe's more than America at 10% is the illegal share of assets. It's quite interesting. I'll have to send that one to Angelina. She'll like that. Take a little photo of that one. Take an American man, an American woman, fine, it's all the same. She opens an account in France. Under the agreements between the two countries, do you mind? You go right ahead. The French bank will inform the US tax authorities. If this same American opened an account in a tax haven, well, no problems. The IRS and the US wouldn't know anything. Concretely, the administrations which could tax these assets, what assets? Three wise suited men. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Okay, some of the turn to the right wing in the modern world. Viktor Orban in 2010. Nadira Narendra, oh, he's still going, I think, the Indian guy. Okay, Donald Trump in 2016. What a glorious year. Hands off the rich. Okay, what's happening deeper? Oh, COVID crisis. So the European Central Bank starts by injecting 750 billion euros until it reaches 1850 billion euros, almost as much as during the GFC. One of their people dies from COVID, and she goes to the old mansion and starts looking for all the junk, which is going to be sold off because they can no longer afford its upkeep. Don't open that box, Leia. Here she finds ownership documents of slaves back from 1824, okay, and where they've been compensated for the former slaves. No, I don't think she actually did find a chain in the box, but it's probably metaphorical. And she seems very upset with the idea that her ancestors were slave owners. Okay, we've got refugees coming across the Mediterranean, proposals. Okay, social ownership of capital. Capitalism is based on the concentration of economic power in the hands of the owners of capital. So trying to go beyond it brings us back to the question of fair ownership. We can institute genuine social ownership of capital with greater power sharing with companies. In Germany, employees have half the votes on company boards. In Sweden, it's 1/3. Proposal 2, temporary ownership of capital. Yeah, not fully up on that idea. A progressive annual property tax, another tax. What if the proceeds finance a universal endowment for every 25-year-old? As early as 1795, Thomas Paine advocated for the introduction of an estate tax. Today, property taxes and inheritance taxes yield at most 3.5% of the GDP. An annual property tax would apply to total assets. So each young person will receive at the age of 25 a grant equivalent to 60% of the average assets per adult in rich countries. Towards a social and federal Europe. An increase in the European Assembly, so bringing the national deputies of various countries into the European Parliament. Tax on high net worth, tax on high income, corporate income tax, a common carbon tax. Half of transfers to state budgets, half joint investment budgets. Vouchers for democratic equality. There's the idea of carbon taxes involved in it as well. Well, you know, it's not going to stop China or India or Asia vastly increasing their amount of carbon emissions. And the West, the traditional West, is now only 1/3 of the world's carbon emissions, basically because they get all the stuff that emits carbon being made in the Asia. So the Asians can do the sinning for the West, and when it all ends up in the same atmosphere anyway. Okay, that's it. Rightio. Stop share.
Okay.
I came for a discussion, not a indoctrination, maybe another time. Well, it doesn't mean I agreed with it. I'm right wing. I used to be left wing. He got me wrong. I'm just expressing what the comic says.
Mark was unhappy. And Mark thinks that Mark being unhappy is everybody else's problem.
Well, there you go, displaying that very sophisticated intellect of yours, David.
I usually say, there goes someone with a very high opinion of himself.
This has been a vast religious problem since the Garden of Eden, hasn't it? What is it? The ego? The struggle with the ego that our ego gives us a distorted view of the world.
Yeah.
Well, you can be the third person and look down on the world and look upon yourself as just being one more number in the world. Or you can look out of your eyes, seeing everything, and you're convinced by the demon of your ego. Hello, Paul. We've seen you before. You got anything to say?
Yeah, how you doing? That was long and it kind of had a bunch of tangents, but when it comes to CO2 emissions and global warming, nothing we do going forward is going to change the trajectory at this point. It's impossible. We may have been able to do something about it 20 years ago, but we're the feedback loops are in play, and when we shut down the skies for COVID and the roads for COVID, it didn't even slow the progression in the atmosphere. So whatever future projections we have to incorporate not only what we're seeing now, but worse. This is one reason I fight people who think we should have tax incentives and other carbon restriction schemes and ways in which maybe we'll save the planet, because it won't matter. It's going to be chaos before any of that would even take effect, even if it was successful. And it can't be successful because it means leaving the entire developing world, maybe 80% of the population, in their current state. And how is that fair? So.
Yeah, I think I remember, Paul, you on this sort of political element in other meetings, and of course, your views weren't popular.
No, they're not popular. Because unlike most in the right, I do accept global warming as a given, and unlike most on the left, I think carbon restrictions a wasted time, and we need to be working on adaptation above all, unless we're going to go to geoengineering, but the progressives hate that too, so I don't know where to go except in adaptation.
I myself am not a worrier. I used to bitterly argue with friends about the reality of global warming. And of course, I would have viewed myself as being on the left side of the equation then. And then I started to hear climate disasterism. And I mean, I've been reading about this stuff since I was, 10 years old. Of course, that was back in 1970. And of course, what happened, I think it was Hansen that ran around the United Nations screaming the end of the world is nigh. And I thought, well, I'd known about this since I was a little kid. It was the rest of the world just suddenly woken up. Yes, of course, there will be an increase in the industrial emission of CO2, and that will raise the Earth's temperature. But it's this idea of a runaway increase. I don't know if that's the case. Like, for example, for us humans, we're actually still in a cold period. I think the average surface temperature might have gotten up to 15 degrees C. It was about 8 or 9 during the depths of the Ice Age. Of course, now I'm on the other side of the equation because I don't believe in climate change disasterism. As I said to one guy, I said, well, when the Ice Age ended, which it didn't quite perfectly, but largely the Ice Age greatly reduced, and the vast ice caps over Europe and North America melted, and the sea levels rose 300 feet. There's a guy was doing a talk on Zoom, and I said, was that a disaster? Well, no, it actually freed up vast areas of the Earth to human habitation. I think that probably conditions, if the temperature rose about 5 degrees C to about 20 degrees C on average, overall, that would be beneficial to human habitation. You would have an increase in the growing season of vast areas of the Earth, like Canada and Russia and Siberia. Of course, the idea of a much larger population of Canadians is terrifying. So maybe we should try and keep the temperature down.
I mean, that's one of the least effects you have to worry about. The frozen tundra is not topsoil. And you would have to shift population everywhere to adapt to those new conditions. I mean, temperature-wise, you'd be fine in Alaska and Canada, but as far as the infrastructure for growing anything, the soil for growing anything, you'd probably be okay with water, but you don't have the people, you don't have, and you don't, the conditions aren't the same anyway. I mean, you're talking about extremely long days during the summer, which plants are not adapted to currently, and extremely short days in the winter. I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm saying it will have to be done, but there are no efforts toward that end right now.
Yeah, well, I'd say predicting the future is full of problems because climate change isn't I wouldn't even see as a major factor on the horizon. I think it's warfare between humanity that's going to be the way bigger issue.
That's what Peter Turchin would say. That's the most immediate threat.
And the other, of course, the other angle here is under present circumstances, and I don't believe in the so-called alternative energies creating, a primary energy. I still believe the world's dependent on fossil energy.
That's true.
But that's the trouble with that is some point it will start to run out. Maybe it'll take a few centuries. It's not only that, of course, the ores that we use, the various metals, reducing greatly in our economic mining of metals is reducing. It becomes a question, of course, if we're to mine lower and lower grades of mineral ores, generally it'll take vastly superior techniques or vastly greater amounts of energy. For example,
Yes.
I think we've got gold mining at the moment. Of course, we've got vastly better methods than those used back in the 19th century. As they say, they now actually reprocess the gold tailings from the 19th century and can get profitable gold from them. But this is going to be the thing that in the end, if fossil fuel runs out, what's going to be the carbon content of the atmosphere by then anyway? If, for example, they did create, say, something like fusion power, and that became a source of energy, that would enable them to continue to, mine low-grade fossil fuels and ores. But what if in a few centuries that our great era of surplus energy and minerals is over?
We've got about 15 years until that happens.
Oh, yeah, well, you're such a pessimist. I'd give it a few centuries. I know that
There's no chance.
I know that there's going to be quite a struggle over the relative abundance of minerals at the moment.
We'll probably hit the limits of copper production about 2030. We're going to hit liquid petroleum limits on about 2030. We've got probably enough silver to last until then, maybe a little more than that. And we'll be hitting terminal decline in all of those resources in the late 2030s. That's current projections.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably say that they might be able to get out of the bit, with, had to say advances in oil extraction, the fracking and so forth.
That did work, but it's more expensive and it's lower energy return. I think the energy return is about 14, whereas it used to be 100. And that will continue, but those get depleted too. The oil shales get depleted also. And it just gets more and more energy required to get what limited supplies are left. And we will have oil forever. The problem, though, is how do you make your pesticides? How do you make your fertilizers? How do you fuel all these things that you can't switch to electric? Like you get diminishing returns on all batteries right now until the truck has a zero payload. And that's the problem with the stupid Elon Musk semis that they announced. God, they must have announced it 5 years ago. And they could not get batteries light enough at the powers required to haul anything. So there's,
Well, a low payload for a heavy
yeah,
vehicle. I think how it works out with electric vehicles, if you just wanted a light vehicle for going around your local city, no problem. Probably quite nice. But the bigger the car and the longer the distance you want to go, you start to run into trouble.
yeah.
Samsung's come up with some new, well, sort of a modification of the lithium battery, which they use silver in it so it doesn't short. And so that's solved a lot of the problem they claim with the lithium battery. So it'll be interesting to see if that comes along. Well, they're claiming that this battery can be charged up to an appreciable amount in 10 minutes and could last 30 years, which, of course, you do have the big problem of what you do with all the battery waste afterwards.
Yeah. Well, not only that, there's enough silver for current usage, which is electronics and solar panels, for maybe 10 more years, and then it goes into decline. If you start using it for batteries, it'll decline much quicker than that. Yeah, are you familiar with the 1972 MIT Limits to Growth study?
I might have heard of it. I mean, I remember the famous Club of Rome idea. That was back in the 1960s or something, 70s, something like that.
Well, the Club of Rome has kind of adopted this model as kind of what they publish on, but it's from MIT. It's a 1972, one of the very first long-term computer simulations about economics, and it became the basis of a book titled Limits to Growth. And what it did is it projected food production and oil, of course, energy, and all the other items that are put into our modern civilization. Phosphorus is a big one because all our fertilizers require phosphorus mines in order to make the amount of food that we do now. Without the phosphorus, the carrying capacity Earth has got at least half and probably more severe than that. So anyway, it crunched all these numbers and it came up with a collapse timeline of about 2050. And at that point, the population starts to sharply drop due to low food production, and all the other inputs go into terminal decline. So they wanted to see how well it is done, how well this prediction has done. So they have done multiple updates. There was a 2008 update, there was a 2020 update, and there's one of the models is called business as usual, meaning we are essentially doing what we do now that we were doing in 1972. And the results to date, in other words, 50 years of tracking, put us somewhere between the business as usual and a moderate adaptation due to technology. But it still hasn't collapsed squarely around 2040. Everything else kind of tracked, even the population, which, you might argue that the fertility rate issue we're dealing with now wasn't what they expected, which was kind of more resources based, but the population is following the curve perfectly. I do think this is the most accurate model. I think this is
Yeah, I think
probably
population since about 1960, world population has increased by 1 billion every 11 to 13 years.
and they predicted that. They had all this in the model.
I think when it hit 8 billion in 22, was it? And it's been 4 years, and I think it's now 8.3 billion. So it just might have slowed down a little bit, but this might so after so it might be 15 years, and the world population will hit 9 billion. This is a huge problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge. You know, they talk about a fight going on in Palestine. I got, you know, the Israelis there, the Jews, and the ones that call themselves the Palestinians. And when their fight started in the 1940s, there was a total of 2 million people there, I think. Or 1.5 million, something like that. And now there's something like about 15 million. But they think the politics is the same. It's just Arabs versus Jews. But there's more Arabs versus Jews now. The people don't take this into account. You've got this ancient politics. But the facts on the ground have changed. I mean, this is a problem in America now that, I mean, you were obviously born in a time when you still thought, well, I can get myself a nice job and have a nice lifestyle as a, you know, expanding economy. And today, since the GFC, of course, the new generation suddenly woke up after a few years. They were in college trying to earn a degree, and they thought, well, of course, I've got my degree. I walk out, I go through the turnstiles, I've got my job. Oops. After the GFC, it was becoming harder before the GFC, but after the GFC, very hard. And, you know, we Westerners, we Anglo-Saxons just weren't used to this. We Anglo-Saxons have been experiencing, with a few hiccups, centuries of success. Everyone thinks in terms of growth, that there will be more.
Well, there isn't going to be at some point, and people, human beings in a negative growth scenario they're very disruptive and they're violent, and it's going to further hurt production. So
that's a problem with the lower classes, even though we supposedly live in an era of equality. I look at these supposed college people marching with the Muslims in the streets, and they're violent because lower classes aren't that wise. They got university degrees. I haven't. No, I've just been a blue collar worker. But I've grown a bit older in your time. You get a bit wiser and you realise, yes, we have this motive to violence, but it will not really solve things that well. It just causes a lot of damage, and it's often better to do things on a rational, peaceable basis and a respectful basis. But they've developed this great idea that we was robbed. Our birthright is to have everything. And if somebody else has got it, I want it, even though I say that they're evil because they got stuff, but actually I want it. That was Orwell's, you know, summation of communism, wasn't it? That a middle class wanted to overthrow the upper class and replace them while claiming the charisma of supporting the lower class, which they didn't really. It was all about themselves. I mean, if you want to get off the Titanic, hold a fake baby. You know, the fake baby is all the causes, you know, or the Palestinians, the underdog causes, the underdogs who don't like being underdogs and want to become overdogs and hate the overdogs that are already there. But that's just the order of nature, isn't it?
the Peter Turchin hypothesis that your civil wars, your revolutions are started by disaffected upper middle class and upper class people who think they're valuable enough that they should be given these high positions, and there are no more high positions to go around, and so they revolt.
Well, in a sense, of course, governments expanded the public service, which suited a lot of people. You know, so you got a person with a bit of a degree and they got a fairly easygoing public service job. I was, dating a woman. She was working for a minister in the Australian government. And I
Yeah.
walked in, and I mean, it was like these guys hardly worked. I imagine there were times when they were busy, but, we went out to lunch. They all went out to lunch. They all went out to a cafe. They were in the cafe, just non-stop. It was already after 2 hours. And I thought, shouldn't you be going back to work? And they, regarded this as the normal. This is how I should live. This is what I'm owed.
Because they're the new nobility. They don't think they should have to do much else. So yeah,
Yes, of course,
yeah.
I went through the great transition, and when Donald the First showed up, the new Emperor of America, I was sitting with my leftist friends, and I hadn't even bothered to listen to the state of elections in America. And I sat down and I said, "No, look, Dan, Donald Trump has won." Oh, and I went, "Yay!"
Yeah, you don't make many friends in some circles by singing the praises of Donald Trump. I personally, I think I can't defend Donald Trump. I think he's an idiot, but on certain issues, he's required at this point. I'm certainly not a Democrat anymore, but I think Donald Trump is the wrong man for the times, and but it's what you got, you can't change it at this point.
Yeah, well, I did admire him on the first day saying men are men and women are women. It's an interesting
Sure.
thing where the new regime has decided to deny reality. I have an
Right.
idea, I have a perspective, reality's got to move for it. If I think 2 and 2 should equal 5, reality has to move. If I think the sky should be a different color, reality has to move. And that's liberty. Isn't it the ultimate progression of liberty? Is it the world should respect my liberty? What I note in all this, people, I don't know what gets into them, but, people thinking, and sex change operation will improve my life. Having a slightly engineering mind, I think that's a disaster.
Yeah, I don't think it improves anybody's life.
Yeah, again, it's my right, my liberty that reality should alter for me. And I think this is one of the comparisons that's been lost, is between external liberty and internal liberty. If I remember my worlds when I was a kid, you went to school. If you misbehaved, you got slapped across the knuckles. And yet also there was a greater sense of internal liberty. People weren't as nosy. Who you were underneath is your business. The only thing that mattered was how you acted externally. But today it seems there's an invasion going on, that they want to control your ideas. You can't merely just obey externally. Your mind has to obey the new regime. You cannot think anything else. You cannot have that. The comparison is made. This is a difference between a tyranny, which old Donald wants to be a tyrant. He wants to be a Roman emperor. Like I said, I still respect him in some ways. I think he's a bit right about some things. He's just doing it in a very rough manner.
Yeah, he is doing some things that are correct. He's right on immigration, and he's right on the trans issues, and he's right on the DEI being overtly racist and wiping it out from government and government programs and all that. But when it comes to actually implementing, I don't know, international policy, economics, he doesn't have the slightest idea what he's doing. But, you know,
I wouldn't agree there. He does have a very good idea. It's simply a question of how you apply it. Like America, for example, exports 3 trillion worth of goods to the rest of the world
yeah,
and imports 4 trillion. And the big master behind all this, when you go follow the trail, it all goes back to China. And China is practicing a beggar thy neighbor mercantilism. They're subsidizing and trying to capture markets. And Trump is very aware of this. I mean, he's not a complete idiot.
international trade with the tariffs, possibly, but changing tariffs every month is just a
Does
way.
seem a bit lunatic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's destroys your production because nobody can predict that. Nobody can decide where to put the factory or who to hire or anything like that. So, and also as far as domestic economics, the tax cuts that he's given are ruinous, and he gave those tax cuts during a time of growth, which makes no sense at all. So, as I said, he's good in many respects, but he's a disaster in other respects. It's not like the Democrats offered anything in return.
Well,
I vote, and they're worse in a lot of ways, and
they
they're
would do
more,
nothing actually on any real situation, anything that mattered.
yeah, their purity tests are getting so bad, and you talked about the purity tests, but they're getting so bad now that they're driving out the people they need to make the party function, which is why the DSA is gaining ground, which I'm not happy to see that because they're really crazy. Democratic Socialists of
Oh, yeah, the
America.
Democratic Socialists, DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America.
Yeah, they've got
Trotskyite Marxists of some type, are they?
oh, they're overtly Marxist. They've got 6 House seats, and they may gain 3 more in November. And this is just a start because nobody thought they could ever win before.
Well, this is democracy. This is a problem the Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle pointed out, that the vast amount of the population will vote for a person who says, I'm going to give you stuff, welfare or, handouts,
Yeah.
even though this won't be good in the long run. Originally, of course, the vote was limited to people that had some type of property. And of course, now the vote is anybody.
Yeah.
And this is where the downfall started. Yeah,
Well, they picked the right time for it because the older generations who would fight this off are going to be dying off, and it's only going to leave the Zoomers and the millennials, and they're not nearly as their work ethic is completely different, and they're going to be very open to a party that wants to give them everything. So this is only going to get worse also to add to the pile of the poly crisis.
well, they seem to believe in a magical economy. They haven't really thought it out. You get a lot of people who somehow they're unemployed, leading dreary lives, or they're employed and leading a dreary life, and they want more. And they dream that somehow this new economy will magically appear. There'll be economic expansion. I mean, one lady saying, oh, in the future, we won't have to work. The robots will be doing all the work for us.
Yeah, you should probably
Well,
wait till the
certainly they've got
robots.
floor cleaners.
You should probably wait till the robots show up if you're going to believe that.
Well, an Android style robot, I've conceived if they ever managed to produce one,
hmm
it would probably be so expensive, it would be giving the orders to the human slaves who are far cheaper.
Yeah, it might be true. Well,
Yeah,
anyway,
well,
I know what I'm doing. I don't think these are going to be long-term resolutions. I think they're going to be short-term.
yeah, well, about 20 years ago, I was sort of studying the market a lot. And this is where I started to change my socialist politics when I saw how things work, how people work. You only get stuff out of people in the long run if they're motivated. If you create a system where they're rewarded for not being motivated, well, disaster is in the works. It's going to show up one day. You ever heard of that mage, Rudolf Steiner, the one that does the what is it, Rudolf Steiner schools? Ever heard of them?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, he was originally a sort of a philosopher, and then he became a mystic and ran a sort of a mystical society. But I read a lot of his stuff, and a lot of his stuff was still fairly good philosophy, fairly good German ideology, fairly good on history. And he made, one of those outstanding statements. This was back in World War One, and he said, have you ever noticed that the most antisocial people you could ever meet call themselves socialists? And I think, yeah, he was smart in a certain way that this is the point. I think that we're living in a very antisocial society. We're living in an atomized society. I've looked at history. I think, I could probably show you the little note I did once. It was based on somebody else's work who happened to be a Marxist, but we won't hold that against him. Yeah, well, you look at history and you go back to the Middle Ages, and cultures originated with an aristocracy. Some great war leader came along, vanquished the dragons or the evil powers, and they started off a sort of a dynasty. Then the democracies tended to evolve because the warrior class that supported the aristocrats started to see themselves as a pair on their own, like the medieval samurai, or the barons in medieval Europe. And then the mercantile class starts to become powerful. They become rich. And that's where we get the oligarchy. You look at the Florentine, the Venetian, the Dutch republics, and these were oligarchies. They had wealthy capitalistic merchants sitting on the tables of power with the aristocrats. But there was a difficulty here. See, ultimately the aristocrats, although they had laws and would follow laws, that ultimately the question of power was decided by the sword if they couldn't agree on anything else. Whereas, unfortunately, the mercantile class has their limits as fighters. And so they create stuff like a Bill of Rights, that the common men are protected by the law from the powerful, the militarily powerful. And this trickles down. They don't believe in trickle-down economics, but I think there is an element of trickle-down they're overlooking. And the power trickled down to very common men who didn't have a great deal of wealth, and we got democracy. And of course, democracy eventually shoots itself in the foot, and we end up with a tyranny, which is, we can see the transitions beginning now in America. That, with democracy, you end up with all these different groups who all decide that society should jump through its hoops. The famous Athenian story, of course, was the man, the son and the donkey. Every crowd tells them to do something different, and ultimately it results in the losing of the donkey, with the old man following and said, well, I thought that was going to happen. Try to please everybody and you please nobody. Yeah. And this is where we are in the Anglo-Saxon West, aren't we? But you look at culture, back in the Middle Ages, for example, you had the large community. You might not have liked everybody in your community, but basically you had to cooperate. You knew the other guy. If there's somebody there giving you a hard time, you knew them personally. Today, we're experiencing a hard time from the empty spaces. We don't know who's troubling us anymore. We don't see the faces anymore. Then during the time when the mercantile classes became powerful, the extended family became the units. And then when democracy became the great thing, and the ordinary people were having a pretty good economic deal, the nuclear family, I mean, finally you could get away from that annoying aunt. I mean, the extended family had its benefits and had its annoyances, but there is this aspect of us that wants to be on our own, because we can, do our own thing on our own. Even if we get rid of the marital partner finally, we're all on our own and we can please ourselves as much as we can. And that's the atomized society. You end up with, say, a single parent family. You get in the aristocratic era was the era of the hero. The warrior era, the samurai, were all about honor and loyalty. Those were the great, important things. During the oligarchy, you had a sort of a united worker. Then in democracy, everyone's going their own way a bit as far as the workers go, and they're no longer naturally so united. And in the tyranny, you end up with a single worker who is just going to obey the tyrant. An interesting thing, of course, if you go back to the Middle Ages, the culture was what we would call more spiritual. It liked things like wisdom, truth, heroism, honor, loyalty, which we still think are the foundational values of our society. It was a more spiritual aspect. Of course, with the merchants, we start to see a commercial society that's ruled by appetites. I mean, in the Middle Ages, people were making stuff more often because they needed it. Today, we're just buying stuff for the thrill. This is, fulfilling an appetite. I have a consumer appetite. I'll just keep on playing it. I'm bored. I have a sexual appetite. I'll keep on playing that. I'm bored. I have an appetite for food, which is out of control. And of course, the great mercantile world, the commercial world now, is providing a lot of the stuff which enables this. So we've switched from, lack of a better word, a spiritual society to a material society, one ruled by the appetites. Look at the politicians. When I was a kid, Christmas is a great time, go and see your family and all that. Well, they don't talk about Christmas much anymore. It's just that the people want more stuff. Give us more stuff, please. So that's a great age at the moment. Yeah, well, we've got the great experiment in New York, haven't we? Mandani, how do you think he'll go?
I think he's going to crash and burn, but he's very popular.
Hope springs eternal in the human breast. When you've got that great lure of the material paradise to come, Christianity sold people on the afterlife would be a paradise for the worthy. Well, Marxism turned it upside down and turned the spirit into matter. Marx just very cleverly replaced everything which came under the category of spirit with matter. And so the paradise will be a material one, which will belong to the right people when it comes. I used to believe that. But I started to see how complex humanity is. And motivation, you don't get people motivated by handing them stuff. The vast majority, you hand them money, they're not going to go and develop a business, or they're not going to succeed. A lot of people who try to develop businesses fail. Like in this particular comic book, they're railing on about the rich. Well, what about all the people want to be rich that tried to be capitalists and crashed and burned? Do we compensate them for losing? You're only looking at the success stories. I mean, it could be due to talent. Elon Musk, what made Elon Musk? Is it talent? Yeah, we could say he's talented in a certain way. He's motivated, certainly very motivated. So that's another element. So, and the other thing is just sheer luck. Probably Elon Musk got where he was. There was a luck was an element in the whole story. And people think that they should be winners when they've got no talent, no motivation, and no luck. How does that work? You got your
Like with a
he-
lot of other things, Elon Musk is the wrong man for the job. And what's going to happen with SpaceX is a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. And the valuation on this company was a joke, and everybody knew it was a joke, but they treated it as another meme stock, and an IPO was issued to a lot of regular people. Well, when that stock goes to zero, which it might, or goes to a few dollars, which it also might, because the business itself is not profitable, then it's going to be a rallying cry for the far left, and they're going to say, "Hey, look, Elon Musk stole all your money, so we have to take out the billionaires now," and there'll be a lot of support for it.
I was referring to this period 20 years ago, and I was working in an idea that history repeats. Now, people talk about America as being the Roman Empire, but what it's been at the moment is the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic defeated the Carthaginians. It became an empire while still being calling itself a republic.
Yeah,
what
that tracks, but we are probably in that transitional period where we're going to look for a dictator. As I said, Trump is very imperfect for this role.
The wannabe imperator.
He's not capable. He's also too old. Even if he was ever capable, he's too old to do it. And it's not clear to me whether the first American dictator is going to come from the right or the left, since we're so evenly split that it can conceivably be either one. Now, I do think in the near term, people like Mamdani and the DSA, they're driving people to the right. And that I'm going to test that in November, because in every midterm, the ruling party loses seats, and the electoral map is looking more and more questionable about that. Right now, it looks like a 50-50. And if the Democrats are not able to take the House, they're not going to take the Senate, but if they're unable to take the House either, then it's going to say to me that these DSA wins are actually driving people out. And the Democrats themselves are driving people out since they hate men, and they're trying to, via these purity tests, they're trying to make sure that everybody who runs within the party adheres to all these idiotic things that they support.
We've solved the problem of men. In the future, we're going to reduce the amount of testosterone in the male of the species.
Yeah, that's what they think. That's what they think.
Which is something which is naturally happening, actually, that once you have a fairly peaceful society for a long time, it seems that testosterone naturally starts to form, because the high testosterone levels in the past were due to the stronger men annihilating the weaker men.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know why they think this is going to work, but again, in the near term, it's going to send more people to the Republicans. But
it will. We'll have effeminate America. The only problem is the other human cultures that have remained masculine will come and wipe you out.
They will if the left takes power. I'm not going to say they won't, because obviously in the 20th century, we saw too many examples of them being successful. And as the old school dies off, there, even in men, there's going to be more and more who are, that short-sighted, and that, whatever you want to say about the Marxists, that willing to bow down to that crap.
There's a word for it. It's called superficial understanding of things.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, we live in an age where there's a lot of stuff at a very superficial level. You know, I mean, if you're living in your medieval village, your world wasn't that big, but you probably understood it at great depth.
Yeah.
But we don't. We just see all surf advertising. What's advertising? Something that's completely superficial, isn't it?
Yeah. So we'll
I
see.
was-
We'll see. I'm rooting for a right-wing dictator. I'm telling you. If we're gonna have to have one, that's my pick. But it's not clear that that's going to be the case.
Well, back about 20 years ago, I looked at this problem and I thought that this is what America was entering into a phase. I bring up the situation of the Gracchi brothers, where you might say a type of civil war started in the Roman Republic. You had a split between the two sides of politics that were going in different directions, whereas in the prior times when they're fighting the Carthaginians, they'd been united. But then they turned on each other, and of course, one party would gain power, and they used the law as a weapon against the other side, which is what we're starting to see now. We still had, you know, when I was a kid, there's still a belief that the law was even-handed, and relatively speaking, it was. But today, they literally think when you get the power, you use the law as a weapon against your political enemies.
Yeah.
And this is what brought Rome down. You know, it took a century. It took a century of one party would get power, attack the other, then the other party would gain power. Eventually, the popularists gained power. Originally, it was the Optimates that held the power. The Optimates lost against the popularists, I think basically because the popularists were the ones that were willing to fight in the military. The Optimates didn't like risk, whereas the popularists were the people, you got people like Julius Caesar who would just really go out on the limb with risk. And they also, the hypocrisy of the Optimates is what did them in as well. You know, the public, after about 60 years, became very wise to their hypocrisy. And as we all know, the hypocrisy of the Marxists and socialists is legendary.
True.
But of course, the sort of right-wing governments which would eventually succeed won't be a right-wing government that would please any of us. It would be a rather nasty tyranny. I see that's pretty much where the world's going with the massive populations, that you're going to end up with a series of sort of empires, which, you know, we've had empires in the past and they're still there. China's an empire, Russia's an empire, America's an empire, Europe's a wannabe empire, Iran's a small wannabe empire.
Yeah.
But in the end, these empires will end up, the populations will end up in a condition which there's not much hope, and they'll be merely suppressing rather large, unruly populations who occasionally will get their rocks off by rioting, which is what we saw in the Roman Empire, but it didn't do any good. You'd knock off one emperor to get another one.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, when you get a population which don't have a common cause anymore, that all think that the society should go in a multitude of directions, you'll end up with one dictator to rule them all.
Yeah. Well, I think that's coming, but I just hope it's going to be from the right.
Eventually, I think it will be. The left has the upper hand, but their hypocrisy and cowardice will catch up with them eventually.
Yeah, maybe. Hey, I got a wife calling me to dinner, but nice talk. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Nice talking to
I
you
like
again,
your comic.
Paul. Yeah. It wasn't my comic. It's on. You can always pick it up somewhere if you want to have a
Yeah.
read. You might find it in the second-hand store somewhere. Okay. See you, Paul.
See you. Take care.
How'd you go with all that, Dave?
As ever.
Oh, we got our, this will be interesting. Accidentals are. New there, it's the normal. You've got an emperor in America or want to be emperor in America. You've got an emperor in Russia. Things are on the up and up because democracy is failing.
Mm.
Because that's the trouble, that when a democracy has a Pericles who everybody listens to and they take the wiser course, things are good. When Pericles dies, things go downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, I'm, about your previous issue, I'm probably what could be described as an avoidant personality. I prefer to be on my own. And obviously, your position is perhaps more extreme than mine. You have that sort of urge in you of there's something you don't like about general humanity. You probably find them too imprecise. You find them maybe dishonest, not that they don't keep their word. And you part of it, and it's difficult for you to handle humanity at large because you're too inwardly precise. That's a particular type of temperament. Some people just don't seem to give a damn about all the little issues. Tomorrow's another day with them, and they just flip through the world, not taking anything too seriously.
Hmm.
Yeah, I find that it's a question of a type of honesty. I think people in general not willing to be objective. Now, obviously, I'm driven by a lot of stuff subjectively. I'm just that little bit more willing to be objective about it. After all, I'm simply some human thing on a small planet in the universe. So, what I think is good and proper isn't the cosmos. But a lot of people think like that. They think whatever they want, that's the cosmos. So yeah, you have a bit of a problem. You think the participants in these meetings are a bit too lackadaisical sort of thing.
Philosophy meetings. Mm.
Well, this is what I'm pointing out. This is the downside that the leftists don't realise, that they're out for an easy ride. Oh, it's really great that these guys are running these Zoom sessions for it. That's great. Somebody else is doing the job. And there's a lack of respect. I think they just got the attitude that's a nice little easy ride, Oh, throw it away, don't care. They don't respect that society depends on people who are willing to do the job. And that was me. That was me. I was the sort of person who thought that's very nice that the world's nicely set up. I'll just leave the responsibility to everybody else. And it's sort of a question, I suppose. Join in meetings. Like I joined in a meeting on the Gibbons, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and of course, I hadn't really read the chapter in Gibbons. I did have a look at a compilation of it. But of course, it was something I was familiar with, history. Chapter 45, I think it was, talked about, was Gibbons on some of the religious conflicts of late Rome, something I'm familiar with. So I got on that meeting and yeah, no problem. So I just wondered, Dave, you sort of you know, your level of irritation is increasing, is it? Or
Not that I've noticed, but you might have something there. Well, I generally keep it to myself, but I guess I tend to be a little bit more relaxed with you.
that you're sort of exploding a bit with, you know, about the guy who was signing up, and then
Yeah, maybe.
Mark.
I'm pretty good about keeping it to myself, but I relax that with you, only to some extent.
I came for a discussion, not an indoctrination. Well, that was what the comic was. I don't even agree with it. I'm the opposite, but there's a view. And even by my limited standards, you need to engage with the views that you don't like, because where's the objectivity? And just thinking that your own little views are the stuff of the universe.
He was unhappy with the meeting, and he wanted to make sure we all knew it.
I did sort of look, I looked at Mark and, you know, just the smallest image of him. You look and you see a guy who's very opinionated and up himself. You just see the smallest image you've been walking around and you get that sort of picture. And I put it down, I might love my own views, but surprise, surprise, the other guy might think something very differently. And I could be that guy. I could be the other guy having a different view of the world, because we tend to reinforce our own views. It's not very adult, actually, because this is something kids are preoccupied with their self. And part of the thing about being an adult, if we go down Kierkegaard's path, is expanding your understanding, being able to engage with views that you don't agree with. We're not living in a very adult world anymore. It became too much that a certain amount of the population looked after society and did a fairly good job. And a lot of the population decided to be dependent, which was always the case. But now you've got the wrong sort of people trying to fill government. People whose philosophical understanding is limited. People that have gone to business school as the basis of all their knowledge. Whereas the older liberal arts taught you, well, sympathy for the devil, Julius Caesar, one of the greatest pricks in history, but he got it done. And then he made his final mistake in not watching the guys around him. Okay. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's you know, you sort of got that sort of social perspective. You're only sort of socializing as through Zoom, is it? You were going to a yoga class in the open to try and.
Yeah, that ended. Wasn't much of a social thing. It was just yoga, but it's over.
And of course, the vagaries of humanity, you've said in the past that you find it quite a challenge with your particular perspective. Okay, so I'm a person who's probably pretty faulty in lots of ways, but I'm fairly precise and fairly honest, which works for you. And yeah. Well, might make it for the movie tomorrow. What is it you're recommending? It's some sort of a.
Well, I was just very surprised that you'd never seen him, Wally. So I think you will appreciate certain aspects of it. I
Oh,
think you will.
so is this a full-length movie, is it, or?
It's 90 minutes. It's not that long.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've got to go somewhere on Sunday afternoon, but I should have enough time to watch it, so I'll see if I can get
90
there
minutes.
tomorrow.
I think
Okay,
you'll.
thanks very much, Dave. I'll catch you another day.
Okay, Stu.